Former MEP and Brexiteer David Campbell Bannerman is a fierce critic of Rishi Sunak and the current Tory leadership, especially after the poor performance at the local elections. Now he's founded a new grassroots group to try and take back control of the party and restore traditional values. The Conservative Democratic organisation launched in December and hosted their first event in Bournemouth last weekend, and I was there. He joins me now alongside Quentin and Kevin. So, David, you've become quite an outspoken critic of Rishi Sunak, particularly recently. Yeah. So tell me, what's he doing wrong and is he doing anything right?
Well, thanks, Nadine. And the first point I'd make is that we should have won seats in the recent local elections, and instead we've had a disastrous result, which is on a par with 4 years ago under Theresa May.
Almost, actually.
Almost exactly.
Yeah.
We lost 48 councils this time. It was 49 last time.
Yeah.
Just over 1,000 councillors on top of 1,269 last time. So it's not personal to Rishi. It's about performance, you know. And it's not an excuse to say he's only been in 6 months, because Boris Johnson inherited that disaster from May. Mm-hmm. In May the 24th, she went in 2019, and he turned it round in the national election, same year, December, less than 6 months later. And it was a great result, with 80-seat majorities. So it's doable, and I think people need to ask questions. That's all I'm saying, is that, I do not want to lose the next election. I don't want 10 years of Labour. I'm old enough to remember 13 years of Labour. It's not fun to be in opposition for that long. So that's my main concern. And I do, CDO is not about bring back Boris, but we do reflect what the members want, and a lot of the members do want an election winner like Boris to ensure we don't hand over the reins of power to Labour.
That was very clear, actually, in sunny Bournemouth on Saturday. Almost everybody I spoke to, was having a conversation with, that said to me, we just need Boris back. Yeah. And that's echoed almost by Labour MPs who kind of let the guard slip just before Boris went and say, that our biggest threat at a next general election would be Boris Johnson. So it's kind of, I think it's almost a given.
Yeah,
you may not like, for those people who don't like the guy, don't like his hair, don't like his policies, you cannot get away from the fact he is a vote winner and an election winner.
That's the way I look at it. I mean, I helped him here in London with his re-election as mayor.
When we were behind in the polls by about 13 points.
I think it was 18.
Was
I
it?
seem to remember at that time. And my whole team were just calling Labour and Lib Dems. And I said, excuse me, is this right? Are we calling the right people? And yes, we were. And they would say, well, we don't normally back the Conservatives, but we like Boris, so we're going to back Boris. And that's the red wall effect. And we're losing the red wall. If you look at the locals, you've got this swathe of yellow all the way up from Sussex to the Cotswolds. Lib Dems coming one way and the red wall going out the window the other way. So, I mean, I think it's conceivable. If the members want to bring back Boris and are strong enough about it, I think it can happen.
So do you agree with this? So Red Wall MPs are saying to me, if we sort the small boats will hold the Red Wall seats. Do you think that's true?
I think it will help. I mean, there has been a shift back to Labour in those seats, and it's almost like, is Brexit done or not? Have we moved on from Brexit? I think is the issue. If we slide back, and of course, Starmer talking about renegotiation, etc., then you're going to have more of a Brexity election. That's helpful to us, I think. But I mean, I've met people on the doorstep, like in Norwich, saying, well, I voted for you in 2019, but I'm going back to my roots, Labour. And people forget that, I mean, a lot of UKIP, almost half of UKIP in those days, were Labour voters. They weren't just right-wing Conservatives. As evidenced by the Red Wall, Hartlepool and Sedgefield, very solid Labour seats that came, thanks to Boris, came to us. I mean, I've been told, I think the analogy is Boris is like the in emergency break glass option. If the building's on fire and it's getting really serious,
Get the dotty hammer out.
You better get your hammer out. I mean, I think a lot of MPs are in denial at the moment, but closer they are to the election, the more it becomes an option if Rishi doesn't raise his game.
Well, so that's a moot point, David, because I think that most of the MPs who voted to remove Boris Johnson would rather remove their own eyes than admit they were wrong. So I don't think that's the case. I don't think we will see him back this side of an election, because that means those MPs saying, well, I was wrong. And because I almost feel as though there's like a demob kind of like atmosphere with some MPs, an attitude that they're already factoring in that we're probably going to lose, and they know the reason why. And for some of them, the fact that we could lose and Starmer would come in and Starmer would move us closer towards the EU and start doing exactly what he said he was going to do yesterday, that is a price worth paying for losing the Conservative Party power at the next election. Now, I find that quite appalling, but there is definitely a sense of that. And the one thing I can say is that, you know, in the corridors and the tea rooms of Westminster at the moment, I have never actually quite known it as it is now. I've been in, this will be my 5th general election. And, you know, I spent 5 years in opposition, and there is almost a demob type attitude from some MPs.
I recognise, I have a lot of friends who are MPs, and I mean, it's almost like they're preparing to hand over the reins of power to Labour. And I deeply regret that, because I think there's a really naive assumption that this is just going to be one term under Starmer, and they can come back and try, sort ourselves out, come back in 4 or 5 years. I don't think it's going to happen. It could well be 10 years. You could find
I don't think Starmer will get a term. If it's a coalition with Labour, I don't think with Labour, Liberal Democrats would hold. But I'm just going to bring in Quentin and Kevin. And the reason why is this. You know, I almost feel as though... So I think it was reported this week that we have the most literate primary school children in the world. Now, that goes back...
We've gone up the list.
In Western Europe.
That started under Labour, that push on literacy, but it carried on hugely with David Cameron, phonics and the work that we did, and it's continued. Why is nobody from my government out banging the drum about this? I almost feel as though there's, oh, well, you know, we've given up now.
Well, I mean, it is not just the responsibility of the ministers involved, because they perhaps haven't had the parliamentary chance to do it, but also, I'm afraid it's the media as well. And also, success, journalistically, is much less interesting than failure. So, I know, it's much...
I know this...
true.
You know, a custard pie is always...
I was furious that nothing good was reported.
It's the old adage, bad news is good news is no news. But look, the Johnson era is over. It's gone. He's dead politically. Why do you fetishise about him? I mean, treat him as if, like, tying him to a horse to be paraded like El Cid, or being one of those monks with the bones of St Cuthbert, carrying his body around Northumberland, thinking you get magical powers.
Interesting, very visionary.
Yeah, but why do you do it? You're damaging your own party, aren't you? I wouldn't be surprised if Keir Starmer offers you a Labour peerage.
Not when the party wants to lose, that was prepared to lose. No, look, Boris, I mean, his hero is Churchill, who came back in numerous manifestations at numerous times after various fallouts like the Dardanelles, etc. I wouldn't write off Boris. Obviously, we're all waiting for the Privileges Committee report, and I believe that's quite soon. It's going to come out, and he's got to respond to it, etc. And the implications of that are interesting. Could he win a by-election if it went down that route? He could well do, actually. And if he did that, then he'd be in a prime position, actually, you know, to save all these MP seats. So I wouldn't write him off. I still think he has remarkable qualities. I'm not saying, you know, you have to ask the public why they're so into Boris. You know, none of us.
Yeah, he's got a cut-through ability. But it was a shambles, I'm afraid, his premiership. And I say that as someone who's naturally rather
likes a shambles.
And I love a shambles. But I mean, he's been a friend of mine since the early 90s. But I don't think it's ever going to happen.
It wouldn't be more of the same.
What? There's a new super-duper Boris sort of
new team around him.
Come on.
So, you know, David, can I just pick you up on your point? You're right. Parts of it were. And I think there is a big question mark over why. And I think that in the not too distant future, people will get more of a sense of why and what was happening behind the scenes. So I think there may be some more information.
Yeah, the Cummings fallout was
to come
terrible.
out. There's some more information to come out. What was going on in number 10 at that time?
A lot of sabotage. But it didn't change that. That is what it looked like. It looked like a disaster.
It was a coup.
No, but it looked like a mess.
Kevin, I love your point because, of course, the last thing in the world Labour want is Boris Johnson to come out and blow their chances of a victory out of the water, which is what would happen overnight. So you will always fight against that notion, Kevin.
Is it true that Starmer, when Boris went, was going through the Labour HQ doing high fives with everyone? Is that true?
Oh, well, they get a scalp, don't they? Did you back, David, did you back Liz Truss?
I did.
Yeah, so thank you very much for that 30 billion plus disaster and people's interest rates going up on their mortgages.
But
the pound falling. I mean, come on.
Even Starmer.
Where is your credibility when you back Truss?
Kevin, I think there's more information to come out about that as well, actually.